This week, the Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, announced a new approach to tackling the scourge of violent crime. He's pledged £200 million to create a joined-up approach and a legal duty between different agencies, including health services, schools and local councils, to work together to tackle the problem. Whilst I think this approach is a great step in the right direction, we must also be realistic. Reports say that this new setup will be a public health approach to violent crime. But joining a gang, heading out, stabbing, killing, maiming and terrorising others, often over something as basic as the purse code that you somehow seem to think that you own, is ultimately a choice. And while it's all well and good trying to help these people, we must also make sure that they understand that ultimately it is them and them alone who are responsible for their choices. And when the wrong choices are made, law and order must kick in.
Michelle, we seem to have had this same debate a million times.
It's not my fault. They keep killing each other.
Well, the thing is, I don't understand your point, because of course law and order is going to kick in, and it's about looking at patterns. Clearly there's a disproportionate amount of people in prison with learning difficulties, with mental illness, kids who've been a product of our care system, and so on and so on. So surely there's a link. All of the data suggests there is. So taking this 360 approach makes sense. He's not saying that law and order won't kick in. He's saying that there is a problem. We're seeing patterns. We're seeing who's most likely to end up in prison. Yep. It's people who have experienced the things that I've just mentioned. So therefore, we need a 360 approach to deal with it.
We do need a 360 approach to deal with it. And I said in my intro, that's a great thing. But I can't help but feel that we seem to be glossing over the fact that these kids are making a choice. So don't take my word for it, just listen to this guy.
I've chosen this lifestyle for the money. I've chosen to do it as it was hard for us to get a good opportunity in life to be someone good, to be someone successful. It came to us easy. We started this game and it was like a game to us.
Do you think that the main reason as to why they're getting into this road life and they're getting involved in all of this crime is because their background isn't the best?
Some people come from a good background. Some people choose it. See, I know a couple of youths. They come from a good background and that. And obviously, they said, yeah, they like the lifestyle because they know a couple of mates who's done it. They said, yeah, let me join in. They want to do it. I can know kids who's come from Chelsea everywhere. Good, nice mum, good, nice dad, but they've chose to.
So my point is, as you heard there, I've chosen to do it. It's a game, and I do this for the money. Why are you rolling your eyes at that?
Because you showed this clip last time, and I'm bored.
Well,
and
I'm
also
bored. I wish they'd stop doing it.
Also, back to what you just said there, I remember a few weeks ago you sat in the same space advocating for early intervention for child molesters. So how is this any different? How is this any different in terms of us having some early intervention for
Because
this?
at the end of the day, what I spoke about was when someone identifies that they are a paedophile,
right,
help and support should be available to them. That's a situation.
How is that different to this?
Well, I'll explain. That's a situation
when our
where
schools
somebody
identify that there is a young boy at risk.
Somebody has identified, I am a problem, they should be supported. My point in all of this is there seems to be a complete, it's not even there, that there's a lack of responsibility, that we're saying to these children, this is a choice. You are choosing to... You're choosing to do it.
But how Sorry, go on,
Can I just... Because I don't think there's necessarily a contradiction between it being a choice in the sense that the law will always apply. I once had a former gang member on my show, on my radio show, and I asked him how he counsels... I did as well, and I asked him how he counsels in his interventions, and the strongest lines he led with was this: he would tell people to take responsibility. But I don't see that as contradicting the other point, which is that evidence shows and research consistently shows that kids expelled from school are vulnerable to being targeted by gangs. I had a debate show where... So I'll tell you why. Yeah, so I'll tell you why. So ADHD. So they have a lot of these kids have had ADHD. They get expelled for what they're being told are minor disruptions, but they're repetitive. They're going to special schools, PRUs, yeah? And those PRUs, the gangs, like grooming gangs in Rochdale with sex crimes, there are criminal gangs that in exactly the same way bribe these kids as young as 12 years old with gifts of Nikes and Adidas trainers. Then they tell them, now you owe us money, you're in debt. Just make this delivery for me. And the reason they're targeting 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds is because they're too young to be stopped by police and searched. So we've got children being exploited in this way as well. So it's broader than just 18-year-olds taking responsibility for stabbing each other. It's 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds.
Right, my perception on this whole thing is, and I have been that kid once, right? So I was in a children's home. I had numerous offences lodged against me and went to court 2 or 3 times, OK? So I was going down that road where I was going to land myself in serious trouble.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't... There were 2 or 3 things sorted me out. One was myself, OK, because you have to take ownership of what you're doing. And if you can't take ownership of what you're doing, then you're going to be led by other people in whatever direction it is they decide to take you. The other one was breaking that chain of going with the wrong people. So I got involved with an activity centre and I did a lot of instructional work there and they looked after me and they mentored me, OK? This is where I'm going with this. The mentoring thing is key, OK?
Yeah.
All right? The third thing that happened was there was a deterrent. I didn't want to go to prison and I didn't want to go to prison for a long time, OK? And I was told all about it and I met various people who've been to prison and all that sort of stuff. So I do believe in this, the prevention is better than the cure. There has to be a cure and it has to be a big fat cure, do you know what I mean? Or people ain't going to be worried about it.
How old you were when you
my first problems with the law started when I was about 13 years old.
when you turned yourself around?
When I turned myself around, I was about 15 to 16. And that was when I sort of had a come to Jesus moment in my own there, but I was like, hang on a minute, Phil, you're going the wrong way.
And you've
it's
also
getting
said
that moment,
going
that come to Jesus to these kids and going, right, boom.
Yeah.
And
Because
going
if you
into the army saved you as well.
I'd say,
Having
the army was a big
as an
factor on my
outlet.
progression and out of it. But
Yeah.
that actual moment when I turned myself over, flipped myself on my head and went, right, Phil, you've got to sort this out seriously. That was my, I call come to Jesus moment. And I wouldn't have had that if I'd have kept knocking around in the same circles.
Can we just see, before we go, I know you're trying to get off, Wayne, but because on the point of prevention, there's a police officer in Glasgow, because the whole thing about addressing it from a health perspective came from the Glasgow experiment, which itself was borrowed from Chicago.
Yeah.
But there's a policeman in Glasgow, and he says, reflecting on this, we've got to understand what the problems are. The police for years have been experts at detection and enforcement. I'd much rather be top of the cliff putting a fence up, stopping somebody jumping over, as at the bottom of the cliff waiting until they've jumped. That's the public health approach as far as I'm concerned. You're engineering out issues rather than waiting for them to happen, which I think resonates well with some of what you said, at least. Yeah.
Well, I've been listening to you because I think this is really a complex area, and I think there's something in what all of you say that I agree with. I've got some sympathy for what you're saying, Michelle, and I think, but I would put it in a context where actually, if you look at Britain, and I think cultural attitudes are really important here. We have a particular attachment to the concept of punishment in Britain, and we have done going back centuries. And even when it's been shown over and over again that our prisons don't make people better, they actually make them worse, they're more likely to reoffend, we still sentence people to go there because we believe that they should be punished, even when it's causing more suffering for all of us because it produces more criminality. And the sympathy I have with what June said, there are a range of factors that make children really vulnerable to crime. 50% of young offenders in prison have been in care. I find that scandalous because these are young people who the state has as a captive audience to nurture
difficulties and mental illness.
And I would say, look at what rich people do for their children. Rich people put their children in beautiful schools with lots of outdoor space, good food, stimulating activities, small class sizes, help nurture their passions and their talents, teach them languages and crafts and art and take them on outings. And they produce people who are interested, ambitious. We look at what we do with poor kids. We put them in large class sizes, in understaffed, under-resourced schools. Proofs are a scandal. I've done some investigations on them. They're a scandal. We put the most troubled kids together in an environment where they're not being given any aspiration, and then we're surprised that they end up in jail.
Can I also say that it isn't about necessarily helping them once they've committed a crime. It's actually about, when you look at the preventative side, it's helping all of us, because the consequences of crime don't just impact the victim and the perpetrator, they impact the entire neighbourhood.
So just to be clear, I'm not saying don't help and support these kids. So I'm not saying chuck all these kids away and forget about them. What I'm saying is, whilst I think this approach is very good, it seems to be also completely forgetting about a very important aspect of this, which is personal choice. That is my problem with this.
I don't think we shouldn't patronise these children. They do have choices. I just want to show you a statistic about, because there is an increase in particular kinds of violent crime. So last year, there were 40,000 offences involving knives or sharp instruments, and that was a 16% increase on the year before. And the crime survey for England and Wales said that there was no change in overall violent offences. So what that means is that within violent offences, offences involving knives and other sharp instruments had gone up. But that, to me, is more evidence that we should take a public health approach, because this is something that is like, it is like an epidemic. It's increasing. And I think we need to look at the causes. But where I agree with you as well is I'm a bit sceptical about some of these political announcements. So, for example, the idea of creating a unit that is kind of dedicated to this, I think distracts attention from the fact this is public services we need.
Except it worked in Glasgow.
It did work.
And at one time,
it's not a substitute for public services.
At one time, Glasgow was deemed the most dangerous city in the developed world, and they did set up a specialised crime unit, and they dropped the murder rate right down. But I'm being slightly using my advantage here in taking control of this debate because I'm going to get the last word. We have to move on. Sorry.
Cheap shot.
It was a very cheap shot. I apologise, but we do have to move on. And